The heir of the conglomerate came to me. Be my girlfriend and split the breakup fee my family will give you. We'll go 50-50. I agreed. Then, the chairman handed me a check. 1 billion. And you marry my son? A month ago, the conglomerate heir, Henry, approached me. Pretend to be my girlfriend. My dad will definitely give you a breakup fee to make us split. Hey, I was bewildered. It'll be at least 10 million. And you can negotiate for more. Whatever we get, we split 50-50. Henry continued. You'll make at least 5 million. So, are you in or not? My personal morals told me this was wrong, but the amount of money was just too tempting. I shamefully agreed, though I had one question. Young Master Henry, do you even need money? I asked. The company I worked for was part of a public group, and Henry, being the heir, lacked for nothing except money. Apparently, I was confused. Henry sighed and looked at me. You don't understand. I didn't understand, but I was curious. Come on, Henry, tell me. My family wants me to marry someone for business reasons. I'm planning to run away from the wedding. Henry explained. I got it. If Henry escaped the arranged marriage, his father would definitely cut off his financial support. So Henry came up with this sneaky plan to scam money from his family. So, are you in or not? Henry asked one last time. Isn't it bad to deceive people? I hesitated for a moment, but quickly added, I'm in. 5 million. It wasn't that I wanted to deceive anyone, it's just that Henry offered too much. And so, for the money, we made a deal. To convince the chairman, Henry and I spent the next month, pretending to be a loving couple. Every day, Henry sent a bouquet of red roses to the office lobby. Every evening, he waited outside my company until I finished work. Even if it meant waiting until midnight, every meal was delivered from a 5-star hotel, and there was always fruit afterward. If I didn't know this was all fake, I might have been moved to tears. After playing the role for a month, the chairman finally couldn't sit still any longer. When I got a call from his secretary, inviting me to meet at a cafe near my office, I knew I was about to become a small-time millionaire. I even applied some subtle makeup to make myself look more pitiful, hoping to negotiate for more breakup money. But what happened next took an unexpected turn. The chairman did hand me a check, but he said, 1 billion, and you marry my son? Heh. The tears I had prepared to shed were stuck in my eyes. Why does this family think so differently? The chairman smiled mysteriously at me. Get married, and I'll give you 1 billion plus $500,000 each month for living expenses. If you have a child, I'll give you 10 billion and 1 million per month for childcare. I was completely dumbfounded. In a state of shock, I found Henry. How much did you get? Henry asked excitedly when he saw me. I didn't answer. I just handed him the check. When Henry saw it, he was stunned. Only 1 million. I'm only worth 1 million. I looked at him calmly. You're worth more than you think, Henry. That's just the deposit, I said. Henry was curious. What's the full amount? 1 billion. Henry was shocked. Does my dad really think I'm worth that much? Not the breakup price. That's the price for marriage, I said seriously. 1 billion to get married. My 5 million was gone. Just like that, my heart ached. I think the chairman saw through our plan, and is using this against us, I said. But Henry slammed the table with excitement. Then we'll play along. Excuse me, I asked. He looked at me with deep emotion. Let's get married. I had a feeling he wasn't looking at me, but rather at the money. Let's get married first. Get the 1 billion. Then we can divorce. Sure, you'll be divorced, but you'll have 50 million in your pocket. I was starting to get excited too. 50 million. Just for getting married and divorced. Let's do it. And so, we agreed. We each went home, grabbed our household registration books, and headed straight to the civil registry office. An hour later, we stood outside the office, each holding a freshly issued marriage certificate. To be honest, I was still in a bit of a daze. A lifelong single woman, was married just like that? Before I could even fully process it, Henry was already urging me, hurry, let's go get the money from my dad. Right, that's the important part. The chairman had given me his number, so I called him immediately. Hello, Miss Chloe. The voice of the chairman's secretary, James, came through the line. I suddenly felt nervous. Secretary James, Henry and I got married, I said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He was probably stunned by how fast we acted. After a while, Secretary James' voice returned. Miss Chloe, please hold on. I'll transfer you to the chairman. James was very efficient, and soon the chairman was on the line. You got the marriage certificate, Chloe. You're very efficient. Our company needs talented people like you, the chairman said with a chuckle. I forced a smile. So, chairman, does your earlier promise still stand? Of course, it does. Come to my office, and I'll give you the check, the chairman said cheerfully. Before hanging up, he added, bring your marriage certificate. After a pause, he added, and Henry too. Henry and I went to the chairman's office. Seeing the freshly issued marriage certificate, the chairman beamed. Good, good. He handed me the pre-prepared check. Here's the dowry. I froze. So, this billion wasn't for the breakup, it was the dowry. But now that we'd come this far, there was no way I could refuse. After I accepted the check, the chairman smiled and said, come home tonight for dinner. I definitely didn't want that, but I couldn't say no to the chairman, so I gave Henry a look. Henry caught on and quickly said, Dad, don't disturb our private time together. The chairman wasn't upset. He kept smiling. I won't disturb you. I just want Chloe to meet the family. Since you've already gotten married, the family needs to give her some red envelopes. Henry immediately changed his tune. All right, we'll go. I stared at Henry in horror, but Henry had already grabbed my hand and said to his father, we're going to buy some things. Before I could refuse, Henry dragged me out of the office. There were too many people around for me to say much. But as soon as we got into the elevator, I pulled my hand away from Henry's. Why did you agree? What if we get caught? I asked. Henry grinned, looking delighted. The gifts will be worth a lot. We'd be foolish not to take them. I couldn't argue with that logic, but something about Henry's enthusiasm made me feel like I was being led into a trap. I had a vague feeling that I might be getting scammed. Though, to be fair, the main target of the scam was Henry. I was just along for the ride. In the end, I went with Henry to his house. Supposedly, the family Henry was supposed to marry into belonged to another powerful conglomerate. And then there was me, Chloe, an average worker in a 996 job, with retired parents who were just regular people. I was a nervous wreck, but the reality was, so, this is Chloe. She's beautiful. Come, dear, this is Grandma's gift. An exquisite jade bracelet was slipped onto my wrist, though I had no idea how much it was worth. Come, Chloe, this is from me, Henry's mother said, handing me a card. Henry's wife is gorgeous. Here, this is from your aunt. I was handed a set of jewelry. The entire Meet the Family session consisted of Henry introducing me to everyone, me calling them by their titles, and them smiling and giving me extravagant gifts. Each one was more generous than the last. By the end, I was starting to panic. Would Henry's family accuse me of fraud and send me to jail? I hadn't panicked when talking about money, but now I was genuinely scared. The way Henry's family treated me had thrown me off. Nervously clutching all the gifts, I sat beside Henry with a stiff smile, trying to survive the questioning from his relatives. I barely made it through dinner. As soon as dinner ended, I started giving Henry urgent looks. Henry ignored me. After 10 minutes, I reached out and pinched his thigh hard. Finally, in pain, he turned to me with a confused look. What are you doing? Let's go. Hurry up, I whispered. We exchanged glances, silently conveying our intentions to each other. Thankfully, Henry got the message. Grandpa, Grandma, Mom, Dad, it's getting late. I'll take Chloe home now, Henry said, standing up. I quickly followed suit. We needed to get out of here as soon as possible, but Henry's grandpa tapped his cane on the floor firmly. Going? Where are you going? There's no room for you at home. Chloe's here for the first time, so she'll be staying over tonight. Henry looked at me helplessly, indicating there was nothing he could do. I had no choice but to take matters into my own hands. Grandpa, I have trouble sleeping in unfamiliar places. I tried to make an excuse. Grandpa immediately smiled warmly. Chloe, you'll get used to it. You'll be staying over often in the future. Right, don't worry. We'll have the maid prepare some warm milk and a sleep aid. You'll sleep like a baby. I opened my mouth to say something else, but Grandpa's face suddenly turned sad. Chloe, do you not like us? I couldn't handle elderly people playing the pity card. I had intended to refuse adamantly, but what came out of my mouth instead was, Grandpa, thank you for the trouble. As soon as I said it, I almost bit my tongue off. Henry's grandpa was already happily calling for the maid to get things ready. I was utterly defeated, and what happened next filled me with even more despair. Henry and I were escorted into his room, under the watchful eyes of his family. What now? I asked Henry. Henry shrugged and sat on the bed. We just get through the night. Don't you have any guest rooms? You could sneak out and sleep in one, I suggested. Henry looked at me with a complicated expression. I don't think sneaking out is an option. Heh. Before Henry could explain, we heard a click from the door. Henry's family had their own unique way of doing things. They'd locked the door to Henry's room from the outside. I slumped onto the sofa, feeling utterly defeated and questioning everything about my life. It wasn't that I didn't trust Henry's character. I was sure he had plenty of women interested in him. I just didn't want to spend the night in the same room with him. The thought of it made me feel awkward. Noticing how pitiful I looked, Henry leaned closer. Want to leave? I perked up immediately. You have a way. Henry pointed at the window. Jump. Are you serious? I stared at him in horror. We were on the 3rd floor. Jumping wouldn't kill me, but I'd definitely get hurt. Henry shrugged again. It's the only way if you really want to leave. Wow, thanks a lot, I said with a deadpan expression. Henry laughed, reaching out to ruffle my hair, completely ruining the hairstyle I'd worked on for so long. Chloe, why are you so cute? What's cute about me? I glared at Henry. When I'm upset, I get bold. I actually had the nerve to say to him, don't get too familiar. Henry paused. Too familiar? I'm older than you, I said matter-of-factly, emboldened by my frustration. Call me, sis. Sis, Henry repeated in surprise. Then, he started laughing, his laughter drawing closer. He leaned over, trapping me between him and the sofa. Sis, Henry called softly. His voice had a hint of playfulness. I froze. Who can resist a handsome guy calling you sis in such a playful tone? Not me, but I couldn't back down. What are you doing? My voice lacked any real confidence. Henry chuckled softly, and that laugh almost made my heart melt. Then, his face came closer, so close that our noses were practically touching. I could hear Henry's voice as he said, Sis, your little brother wants to break the rules. My heart had never beaten so fast. Thump, thump, thump. It felt like it was going to leap out of my throat. Henry's face was right in front of mine. Just a little more, and we'd be kissing, or rather, he'd be kissing me. Honestly, Henry was handsome and rich. It wouldn't be a bad deal for me. Maybe I should just go for it. I was ashamed of myself the moment I had that thought. How could I let myself be swayed by good looks? But Henry was just too much. It wasn't just that he was handsome, he was playfully calling me, sis. How was I supposed to resist? As I mentally prepared myself and almost closed my eyes, Henry finally made his move. He reached out his hand, and tickled me under my arm. Ha ha ha. Henry, you jerk. You shameless jerk. Ha ha ha. Get lost. I never would have imagined that Henry's idea of crossing the line was tickling me. Does he think he's being funny? All this build up, and this is what I get. But soon, I didn't have time to think about any of that. I was laughing so hard that tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't take it anymore, so I had to beg for mercy. Young Master Henry, I was wrong. Henry, I was wrong. I won't make you call me sis anymore. How about I call you big brother instead? Henry stopped tickling me. Let me hear it. Under such pressure, I had no choice but to give in. My eyes were still teary as I looked at Henry with a pitiful expression and said, Big brother. Henry immediately broke into a grin. Good girl. He reached out and patted my head. I was so angry I almost bit him. However, once Henry finished ruffling my hair, he finally backed off and said something that actually made sense. We'll wait until later tonight, when everyone's asleep. Then I'll help you sneak out. Of course, I liked what I heard, but I still looked at him skeptically. After all, the door was really locked. But when it came to this, Henry actually delivered. Around midnight, Henry climbed out of the window. He didn't jump. Instead, he climbed over to the room next door. which was his study. From there, he circled around and unlocked the door from the outside, then snuck me out of his house. Originally, Henry was supposed to drive me home, but while we were on the road, he spotted a barbecue stand on the side of the street and suddenly got excited. Chloe, how about a late night snack? Me. I touched my stomach. I actually wanted to go home, but my stomach disagreed. Half an hour later, Henry and I were sitting at a roadside stall, each with a beer in hand, and the table was covered with grilled skewers. After a few sips of beer, I started to feel bold, and my curiosity resurfaced. Why did you want to escape the marriage? I asked him. Henry answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Because I don't like her, so I have to run. And if you never meet someone you like, does that mean you'll never get married? I pressed. Henry looked at me and suddenly laughed. Aren't we married now? I froze. Looks like I'll be stuck with you for the rest of my life, Henry teased. I instantly put on a cold expression. Rejected. Hearing that, Henry suddenly leaned in close. What's wrong with me? He asked. His expression shifted, and now he was looking at me with this pitiful, puppy dog look. Who could resist that? I was going crazy. After pretending to be Henry's girlfriend for a month, he had always seemed like a normal person, but today, out of nowhere, he was acting all cute and playful. And the worst part was, it hit all my weak spots. Looking at Henry and hearing his voice, I felt my heart melt. I was this close to pulling my heart out and saying, "Don't cry, little brother, I'll give you my life." But remembering Henry's status, I quickly reined myself in. I coldly extended my hand and pushed his face away. I'm being serious here, Henry sighed, reluctantly returning to normal. All right, big sis, what serious business do you want to discuss? As he spoke, he gave me one last pitiful look from the corner of his eye. My heart couldn't take it, especially when he called me sis. He called me sis. I had no choice but to stare straight ahead. In my mind, I silently chanted, lust leads to emptiness. Emptiness leads to lust. Only after calming myself did I continue speaking. Don't you think your dad tricked you? Henry looked puzzled. Did he? Of course. I was so worked up that I turned to face Henry. Henry blinked at me in confusion. I was at my limit. I couldn't help swallowing hard. And Henry, without warning, reached out, lightly touching my neck. Big sis, what are you thinking? I slapped his hand away, pretending to be indifferent, and forced myself to stay on topic. You said you didn't want an arranged marriage, but after we got married, your family was so happy. Don't you think that's strange? Henry paused, then turned to stare straight ahead. It does seem a bit off, he said, his voice drifting, but I didn't notice anything because I was too focused on explaining my theory. I think they just wanted you to get married, period. They didn't care who you married. The chairman had a perfect grasp of his son's personality. He probably predicted that Henry would resist the arranged marriage and find a fake girlfriend, so he made an offer to turn the fake into a real marriage. Knowing Henry's nature, he would likely fall into the trap, and once we registered our marriage, the chairman's goal was achieved. I felt my analysis was on point, logical, reasonable, and based on solid evidence. Henry listened to my reasoning and suddenly sighed again, this time sounding more resigned. Big sis, should I praise you for being smart, or call you silly? I was upset. I'm helping you analyze things, and you insult me? Henry chuckled, then asked, according to your logic, do you think my dad would ever let us get divorced? Crap, did I just sell myself for money? Granted, it was a lot of money, and Henry was handsome, rich, and he called me sis. Maybe it's not such a bad deal after all. The fact that I was so ready to accept all of this filled me with a deep sense of shame. Henry, noticing that I hadn't said anything and seeing my strange expression, suddenly said, all right, I was just messing with you. I was confused. If we want a divorce, my dad can't stop us. He's rich, sure, but he's not a king. The only real hassle is the divorce waiting period, Henry explained seriously. I opened my mouth but didn't know what to say. Should I confess to Henry that I'd already accepted the idea of spending the rest of my life with him? Do I have any shame left? In the end, I kept quiet. Henry's mood visibly dampened, but I was too lost in my own embarrassment to notice. Let's go. I'll take you home, Henry said. I looked at the table, which was still covered with food, and asked in surprise, we're not finishing this. It's late. You should get some rest. Sensing that Henry was in a bad mood, I didn't argue. I simply nodded. Henry silently drove me home. As I was getting out of the car, Henry finally spoke. If we get divorced now, my dad will probably figure out that we tricked him. He might come after you. Let's keep up the act for a little while longer. I didn't say anything. I couldn't figure out if we were still scamming Henry's family, or if the chairman had scammed both Henry and me. Seeing my silence, Henry added, don't worry, once this blows over, you can leave any time you want. With Henry going this far, what could I say? I could only nod and agree. All right. Then Henry got angry. Chloe, do you really want to divorce me that badly? Henry's voice was full of frustration. I was taken aback and asked, don't you want a divorce? Henry was also taken aback, but in the end, he shook his head as if in defeat. Silly Chloe, he muttered. I was indignant. I'm a top graduate. Henry just laughed. All right, clever big sis. Get inside and get some sleep. Life after marrying Henry didn't seem all that different from before. Henry's family didn't bother me, and Henry kept up the same routine as before. He still sent flowers, food, and snacks every day. At night, he waited outside my office to pick me up. Sometimes we had dinner together, and other times, he quietly drove me home. If there was one change, big sis, you look beautiful today. Good night, big sis. My casual joke had clearly gotten to him. He'd stopped calling me by name and started using big sis for everything. Every day, my mind was filled with one word, sis, sis. And the worst part, I enjoyed it. Henry calling me big sis over and over was melting my heart. I even started to think maybe we could really stay together forever, especially after exactly 1 month of marriage. A large sum of money suddenly appeared in my bank account, 5 million. The note read, living expenses. When the chairman promised money, he wasn't kidding. I suddenly thought, maybe I didn't need to get divorced after all. But just as I was basking in my good fortune, my mom called me that same night. At the time, I was still in Henry's car. Chloe, I'm telling you right now, even if you're on your deathbed, you're going to that blind date on Saturday. My mom's voice was so loud that even though I wasn't on speaker, her yelling filled the car. I held the phone far away from my ear, and only brought it back once my mom was done screaming. I weakly lied. Mom, I have to work this weekend. Oh, work. Heh, fine. I'll tell the guy to meet you at your office, my mom said confidently. I panicked. If he showed up at my workplace, it would be a disaster. I thought quickly and said, Mom, I actually have a boyfriend. Oh, really? Then give me his phone number right now. There was no way I was giving her Henry's number. After that, my mom started guilt-tripping me. Chloe, your dad and I aren't trying to force you into anything. Just meet the guy, even if it's just as friends. Okay, we've already arranged everything. If you don't go, where does that leave us? If you don't like him, just make an appearance for the sake of face. With my mom putting it like that, what could I do? I had no choice but to agree. Okay. My mom instantly brightened up and added, and remember to dress nicely for the date. Since I had already agreed, this wasn't a big deal. I obediently replied, okay. After finally hanging up the phone, I sighed in relief. Then I heard Henry's voice. Big sis, are you planning to cheat on me? Henry's voice was full of resentment, and he had that same pitiful expression again. I suddenly fell silent. For some reason, I felt a little guilty. Before I could finish, Henry interrupted me. I know, we're just pretending, but don't worry, big sis, you can go. Worst case, everyone will see that I can't control my wife, and I'll be known as the guy whose wife openly cheated on him. Even though our relationship was fake, the marriage certificate was real, so going on a blind date while married really didn't feel right. But on the other hand, my mom was tough to deal with, and I didn't know how to explain the situation. I was caught in a dilemma, and Henry, of course, was being extra understanding. When I got out of the car, he still had that sad smile on his face. Really, big sis, it's okay. You can go. The guilt weighed heavily on me, but in the end, I went to the blind date that weekend. Because, well, my mom is scarier when she's angry. I went with my best friend, Luna. I planned to get the date over with as quickly as possible so we could go shopping afterward, and I could vent about my recent crazy life. The date was set at a cafe. When we arrived, the guy was already there. Luna gave me a knowing look before leaving to grab a seat nearby. I took a deep breath, walked over, and sat across from the blind date. He looked decent, and we were around the same age. All in all, he seemed like a good match. If Henry weren't in the picture, I might have considered him, but now, I smiled politely and introduced myself. Hi, I'm Chloe. I'm really sorry about this blind date, but big sis. Before I could finish, a familiar voice cut in. I turned around and saw Henry walking toward me. He came right over, nudged me, and said, "Big sis, scoot over." I'm on a blind date, I reminded him. Henry smiled. "I know, I just wanted to help you check him out." He turned to my date, still smiling innocently. "You don't mind, do you?" My date smiled awkwardly, then turned to me and asked, "I heard you're an only child. Is this your cousin?" "Nope, no blood relation, but we're very close," Henry answered for me, emphasizing the words, "no blood relation," and "very close." Seeing the situation about to spiral out of control, I acted quickly. "Sorry, this blind date was set up by my parents. I'm not really interested in dating right now. I apologize for wasting your time." With that, I stood up, grabbed Henry by the arm, and marched out of the cafe. Henry, thankfully, played along. Once we were outside, I let go of him and shot him a displeased look. "Henry, what are you trying to do?" I asked. Henry dropped his previous expression and, a bit helplessly, pointed toward a corner inside the cafe. "I was actually here with my friends today. I got here before you, and I honestly didn't expect to see you here too." He sighed, continuing, "My friends know about our marriage and have met you before, so if I hadn't come over, it would have looked like either I got cheated on or you were cheating on me." I glanced toward the group Henry had pointed to. Sure enough, there was a table of people sitting there, so it was really just a coincidence. Before I could make sense of it all, Henry pouted again and said, "Big sis, you put on makeup today, and you even wore a nice dress." I can explain." As soon as I said that, Henry's face lit up with a smile. "Go ahead, big sis, I'm listening." His carefree, patient expression was a far cry from the pitiful look he'd had earlier. Great, I'd fallen for his trick again. This was easy to explain, though, especially since Luna was still inside the cafe. In the end, Luna and I joined Henry's table of friends. Henry wrapped his arm around my waist as we sat down in front of his friends. "This is Chloe, my wife. Oh Tilda, hey there, sis-in-law." Henry's friends immediately started teasing. "Big sis, just ignore them," Henry said as he helped Luna and me find a seat. I had barely sat down when one of Henry's friends approached me. "Big sis, mind adding me on Weshit?" Before I could react, Henry waved him off. "What are you calling her big sis for? Call her sis-in-law," the guy teased. "Is there a difference between big sis and sis-in-law? Come on, Henry, are you the only one allowed to call her big sis?" Henry gave him a sideways glance. "You got a problem with that?" "And nope, she's your wife, we wouldn't dare," the friend replied, laughing nervously. Henry ignored him. Sitting down beside me, he handed me his phone and said, "Big sis, see if there's anything you'd like to eat." Henry's friends were all around the same age as him, and although I didn't know them well, we had plenty to talk about. Plus, Henry was very considerate toward me, so the atmosphere was nice. I actually felt pretty comfortable. After chatting for a while, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. Nature calls. After all, what I didn't expect was to overhear something, let's say, interesting, about Henry while I was washing my hands. You know how restrooms are often a hub for gossip? Well, apparently, that's true even in cafes. The conversation came from two of Henry's friends, and since the bathroom wasn't well insulated, I heard every word from where I stood by the sink. "Hey, don't you think Henry's wife looks kinda familiar?" "Yeah, a little. She looks like his ex-girlfriend, Violet. I'd forgotten her name until you mentioned it. Even their names are similar. TSK. So is Henry just dating a replacement for Violet? Who knows? Rich people are hard to understand. Haha. But, you know, Chloe's prettier than Violet. Pretty doesn't beat being a first love, though. True. Back in college, Henry used to dream about Violet. Haha. He was totally obsessed. Big romantic. Heh. By the way, didn't Violet come back recently? I think so. Does that mean things between Henry and Chloe are doomed? They laughed as if my situation was some sort of joke. In reality, what Henry thought about his ex-girlfriend, or whether he had chosen me because I resembled her, shouldn't matter in our arrangement. It didn't change the fact that our relationship was purely transactional. But for some reason, I felt a bit down. It was like a heavy weight had settled on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I even felt like crying. Maybe it's because I've never been treated this way before. It's not like it's because of some other feelings. I returned to Henry's side about 20 minutes later. He looked at me with concern. What took so long? I responded flatly. Then, I added, you guys keep playing. Luna and I are going shopping. That had been the plan from the beginning. After all, Henry blinked in surprise, then smiled. I'll come with you. I opened my mouth to refuse, but Henry had already stood up. He waved to his friends. See you guys next time. Maybe I didn't want to reject him, after all. So what was supposed to be a girls' shopping trip became a group of 3. Luna, being the shopaholic she is, dove into the mall the moment we arrived. She dragged me along with her, and Henry didn't mind one bit. He just followed behind us, like a dedicated sidekick. At one point, Luna picked out a dress for me, and practically shoved me into the dressing room. The dress was intricately designed but a bit tricky to put on. While I fumbled with it, my mind started wandering. Did Henry really approach me because I looked like his ex? I mean, why else would a regular working girl like me catch the eye of someone like Henry, the heir to a conglomerate? Honestly, I wanted to ask him directly. The problem was, what exactly was our relationship? I wasn't his wife, not really, and I wasn't his girlfriend either. At most, I was a business partner. I had no right to ask him about something as personal as his feelings. I sighed heavily. Once I finally got the dress on, I stepped out of the dressing room. Luna was fixing her hair in front of the mirror, and immediately gave me a dramatic eye roll when she saw me. Chloe, did you leave your soul at home today? What's up with how you're wearing this dress? Luna scolded as she came over to help me adjust it. I gave a sheepish smile. Luna had been my best friend for years, so my mood didn't escape her notice. She didn't say anything, though. After fixing the dress, she put her hands on my waist. You still have such a tiny waist, she said with exaggerated enthusiasm. Then, she playfully squeezed my chest. And a big chest too, she added, her voice filled with mock appreciation. Lastly, she sighed dramatically. Honestly, I just want to hug you, and cuddle you every night. I laughed, but quickly put on a mock expression of a virtuous maiden under attack and hugged my chest protectively. Hands off, you pervert. Luna laughed as well, then pushed me in front of the mirror. Our Chloe is still as beautiful as ever. I looked at my reflection and smiled. With Luna around, my earlier gloom seemed to melt away. But after Luna left, and it was just me and Henry in the car again, the awkwardness returned. The whole ride to my apartment was spent in silence. We're here, I said as I prepared to hop out of the car. Wait, Henry suddenly called out and stepped out of the car as well. I turned to him, confused. What's wrong? Henry looked at me with a strange, almost conflicted expression. Then, finally, he put on that familiar pitiful look and softly said, Big sis. That one phrase made my heart skip a beat. I'm so jealous of your best friend. Henry said, she gets to touch your waist and… Henry's gaze slowly dropped to my chest. Finally, he sighed wistfully. I want to. What? Does he want to? Hold. No. Henry, are you a pervert now? Have you officially crossed over from being cute to being a shameless flirt? Henry took 2 steps forward, and instinctively, I took a step back. But before I could take another step, Henry's hand was already resting on my lower back. Big sis, can I hug you? Henry asked softly. I froze, looking at Henry in front of me. I felt the urge to nod. The word okay was already on the tip of my tongue, but at the last moment, I swallowed it back down. I wasn't completely oblivious. Henry's behavior lately had gone far beyond just pretending for the sake of fooling his family. So, Henry, do you like me? I suddenly asked, cutting straight to the point. I couldn't ask him about his ex-girlfriend, but I could at least ask him this, right? Henry was truly caught off guard this time. For a moment, he just stared at me, then he chuckled softly, a little helplessly. Big sis, you really are, big sis. Seeing that Henry was about to give me an answer, I interrupted him again. I'm going home, Henry. And with that, I turned around and ran. Henry clearly didn't expect that. I just bolted. After running quite a distance, I turned back. Henry was still standing by the gate, smiling as he waved at me. I pressed my lips together and coldly turned away. I couldn't ask him about his ex-girlfriend, and it bothered me. But if I was going to feel upset, I had to drag Henry down with me. The next day was still the weekend. I had planned to spend the entire day lazing around at home, but I was not prepared for a friend request to pop up on Weshit. The note read, I'm Henry's ex-girlfriend, Violet. What the heck? I had only just heard about her yesterday, and now she's reaching out to me. Curiosity got the better of me, and I accepted the request. Almost immediately, a message came through. Let's meet. Attached was a location. I had no idea what was going on, but for some reason, despite my better judgment, I typed OK and hit send. Apparently, my fingers had a mind of their own. Violet had arranged to meet at a tea house. When I arrived, she was already there, elegantly brewing tea. She had an air of grace about her that I couldn't quite place. Upon seeing me, she smiled politely. You're here, please, have a seat. After I sat down, she poured a small cup of tea and handed it to me. Try some. I took the cup but didn't drink. Instead, I placed it back on the table. What did you want to talk about, Miss Violet? I asked directly. Violet smiled softly. I heard Henry got married. I also heard his wife looks a lot like me, so I wanted to meet you. I frowned slightly. I didn't like her tone. She continued, I'm not sure why Henry would do this, but I don't think it's fair to either of us. I still love him, and I came back to try and win him back. I didn't expect. Violet trailed off, giving a helpless smile, as if Henry's actions were something she'd learned to tolerate over the years. I just felt uncomfortable. Seeing my silence, Violet kept smiling and then pulled out a check, sliding it across the table to me. Miss Chloe, this is a little compensation from me. It's better if you leave on your own terms rather than waiting for Henry to bring it up. I looked at the check and couldn't help but laugh. Who would have thought that after all this time, it wouldn't be the chairman offering me money to break up with Henry, but his ex-girlfriend instead. But I wasn't laughing at the check. I was laughing at Violet. I didn't know if Henry liked me, but I knew for sure that he didn't like people like Violet. I looked up at her and said, Miss Violet, if you want to talk, I think you should be speaking directly to Henry. Violet blinked in surprise. I don't want to see you get hurt, really. I smiled faintly. Miss Violet, if you knew Henry well, you wouldn't believe he's the type to marry someone while still in love with someone else. Violet's face stiffened, and she quickly tried to backtrack. I didn't mean any harm. I ignored her and continued. You say I look like you, but I'm older. Isn't it more accurate to say you look like me? Of course, I don't think we're anything alike, not in appearance, not in personality, and certainly not in taste. I stood up, my eyes landing on the teacup in front of me. I don't understand tea. I much prefer bubble tea. I can't accept your generosity, Miss Violet. And one more thing. Trying to manipulate things from behind the scenes doesn't make you cultured. Only when you stop being a homeworker will your character truly shine. With that, I turned and walked out, smooth and clean. Of course, while I might have looked confident in front of Violet, I still felt somewhat upset. I'm not one to wallow in self-pity. So, I pulled out my phone and sent Henry a message. Let's get a divorce. Short and sweet, with no explanation. Let Henry figure it out for himself. It's his fault his ex came to bother me. After sending the message, I promptly blocked Henry on everything, feeling much more at peace. Violet had set the meeting for a bit late in the evening, and it was far from home. By the time I got off the subway, it was already past 9 p.m. That's when regret started to set in. Why would I obediently go to a tea house? I should be just picked a place near my home. It was my first time after all, so I lacked experience. I sighed as I started walking towards my neighborhood. There's a small path between the subway station and my neighborhood. The streetlights along this path had been broken for over half a month, and no one had bothered to fix them. It was pitch black and a bit frightening. Luckily, I've walked this road countless times, but today, something felt different. Behind me, there seemed to be the sound of footsteps. My heart clenched. I instinctively tightened my grip on my phone, and started walking faster. The faster I walked, the quicker the footsteps behind me became. I immediately pulled out my phone, and out of habit, tried to call Henry. After searching for his number, I suddenly remembered that I had blocked him. Just as I was about to call Luna instead, the person behind me rushed up. With a smack, he knocked the phone out of my hand, and started dragging me toward a corner. Help! I shouted loudly, but I knew how this path was. The chances of someone coming to save me were slim, so I had to rely on myself. The attacker was pulling at my arm, and I couldn't shake him off. So, I lowered my head and bit down on his hand as hard as I could. He yelped in pain and let go. As soon as I was free, I swung my bag at his face with all my strength. The more scared I was, the harder I hit. After throwing the bag, I took off running. I swear, that was the fastest I'd ever run in my life, but I still couldn't outrun him. Just as he caught up to me, I stumbled and fell to the ground. At that moment, I felt like my whole world had gone dark. I'm doomed. As he approached me, suddenly a dark figure appeared and pulled him away, landing a hard kick on him, before rushing over to check on me. Chloe, are you all right? It was Henry's voice. In the darkness, I looked up at him, though I couldn't really see clearly. But at that moment, I felt overwhelmingly wronged. Henry, you're such trouble. Henry, yes, it's all my fault. It's okay now. You're safe, sis. It's all over. Hearing that, I immediately felt a lump in my throat and started sobbing. Henry held me, comforting me, while my tears soaked his shirt, but he didn't mind. He kept soothing me. It's okay, sis. It's all okay now. I'm here. By the time I'd finally cried my heart out, the person who attacked me was long gone. I pulled away from Henry's embrace. Even though I couldn't see clearly, I could feel how awkward the situation was when I touched the wet patch on his chest. Sorry about that, I said, a little embarrassed. As long as you're all right, Henry replied. Sis, let's head home. Okay. I nodded, but when I tried to stand, I suddenly stumbled and almost fell again. Luckily, Henry reacted quickly and caught me. What's wrong? Henry's voice sounded worried. I felt a bit embarrassed. My legs gone numb. Henry chuckled softly and then crouched down in front of me. Hop on, I'll carry you home. Having the young master of a big corporation carry me home, that's a bit much, right? That's what I was thinking, but in reality, that would be a bother for you, I said, as I promptly wrapped my arms around his neck. Henry must have been amused by how my actions contradicted my words. His laughter made me feel a bit awkward. I tried to start a conversation. Why were you here? Henry's tone turned a bit resentful at my question. Do you really not know? He asked. Hey, I was confused. It's not like I called you here, right? I asked. Henry's voice sounded pitiful. Sis suddenly said she wanted a divorce and blocked me. Don't you think I'd come to check on you? I had completely forgotten about that. Actually, the real culprit should be Violet. But speaking of his ex, Henry, do you really like me? I suddenly asked. Changing the topic, Henry sighed. Sis, are you sure this is the right time to ask that? Why not now? I asked, puzzled. Because I can't see your face, Henry replied. Hey, I was even more confused. Does he need to see my face to answer a question like that? Before I could ask, Henry's next words caught me off guard. When I say I like you, sis, I want to be looking at you. My face instantly turned red. Thankfully, it was dark, and I was lying on Henry's shoulder, so he couldn't see. I buried my face in his back and mumbled, but you've already said it now. Henry sighed again. I was afraid if I didn't answer, you'd run away again. Next time, it might be the divorce papers. I couldn't help but smile. My legs, hanging from Henry's back, started swinging as my mood lifted. Henry must have noticed my good mood. Feeling better, sis? He asked. I quickly put on a serious face and said, not really. Then can you tell me what I did wrong? Why did you block me and ask for a divorce? Henry asked. I thought to myself, isn't it inevitable that we'll get divorced eventually? Oh, but if Henry likes me, maybe not. Feeling secretly happy inside, I deliberately lowered my voice. Henry, don't you know what you did? Henry sounded confused. What did I do? Your ex-girlfriend, Violet, I hinted. Henry still sounded baffled. What about her? How do you know her? I scoffed. I heard that I'm just a stand-in for her. Henry suddenly stopped in his tracks. Before I could react, he had already put me down. Wait, what? Just as I was about to feel disappointed, Henry scooped me up in a princess carry. Go on, sis. Keep talking, he said. We had just walked out of the dark path, so now I could clearly see his face. He looked down at me, his eyes reflecting my enlarged figure. I want to look at you while you speak. I was completely floored. I think my leg's better now. Henry said, without moving an inch. I had to be more direct. Put me down, please. Nope. Henry looked at me and said, I'm afraid you'll run away. I had no words left. I wasn't Henry's match. So, I quickly changed the subject and told him everything about how Violet had approached me. After I finished, Henry had a strange expression on his face. I'm totally confused, Henry said, looking at me seriously. The defendant requests to submit new evidence. What new evidence? I asked curiously. Henry smiled. That's a secret. You'll find out in court. You're really keeping it a secret. I was stunned. I didn't expect Henry to play along like this. By the time we finished talking, we had reached my apartment complex. Henry's car was parked right outside. Are we going somewhere? I asked, confused. We're going to the hospital for a checkup and to file a police report, Henry said, sounding a bit helpless. Hearing that, I finally remembered. Right, I needed to report the attack. Wait a second, my phone and bag. What about my things? Don't worry, I sent someone to retrieve them, Henry said, patting my head. Sis, you just need to rest and leave everything else to me. Do you trust me? When he smiled and looked at me like that, I couldn't say no. I silently nodded. After Henry left, I swallowed hard. This guy is something else. Henry took me to the hospital for a checkup first. Then we reported the incident to the police. Luckily, I only had a few minor scrapes and bruises. Nothing serious. But Henry insisted on taking me back to his place afterward. Not his family's mansion, but his own large apartment. Looking at Henry's bedroom and his big bed, I suddenly felt a bit shy. Oh wow, we've been married for over a month now. And then, I turned around and saw Henry setting up a floor mat to sleep on the floor. What are you doing? I couldn't help but ask. Henry looked up with a pure, innocent face. I'm worried about you. So can I sleep here on the floor? Is this really about sleeping on the floor? Henry, are you okay? I was shocked when I heard the words come out of my mouth. Did I just say that? Chloe, Henry called me softly. I clutched my clothes, staring at the floor, completely silent. I've never been this embarrassed in my life. Chloe, look at me. Henry's voice came again, this time even closer. I couldn't muster the courage to lift my head. This is so mortifying. Then, he reached out and tilted my chin upward. I don't know if I lifted my head myself, or if Henry raised my chin, but the next thing I knew, when I looked up at him, I could see that his eyes were fixed only on me. He leaned down and kissed my lips. Chloe, you're not getting away. I thought, well, I never really planned to run. Everything felt so natural. As things heated up, Henry whispered softly into my ear, Chloe, I'm no longer jealous of Luna. Because now, Chloe belongs to me alone. I wanted to say, I belong to myself, but soon, my thoughts became a jumbled mess. That night, the only thing I remember is Henry repeatedly calling me, Chloe, in various different tones. It was seriously overwhelming. Henry took me to meet Violet. Violet was visibly excited when she saw Henry, but when she noticed me, her expression froze. Henry didn't give Violet a chance to speak and immediately went on the offensive. Lady, do you even realize what kind of person you are? spreading rumors that you're my ex-girlfriend. What? Did you end up believing your own lies? Hearing that, I got curious. She wasn't his ex. Violet's face went pale. Henry, are you seriously saying you never liked me? Henry chuckled. If you don't have a mirror, I can donate one to you. The only person I've ever liked is my wife, Chloe. Always have, always will. When Henry said that last part, he was looking straight at me. Since we had just confirmed our relationship, and were still in the honeymoon phase, his words made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, though it was kind of embarrassing, especially in front of, well, Violet, but it felt amazing. Henry didn't stop there. He even made it clear to his friend group, don't go talking nonsense in front of my wife. Chloe is the only person I love. To prove his sincerity, Henry even shared all his passwords. Sis, does this evidence satisfy you? Satisfied. I couldn't be more satisfied, but I was still curious. So what's the deal between you and Violet? She was a college classmate. We worked on some projects together, and then my roommates started joking that I talked about her in my sleep, which she somehow believed. After that, Violet began spreading rumors that we were together. Henry looked genuinely disgusted as he recounted the story. Didn't you do anything about it? I asked, intrigued. I sued her. She was so embarrassed that she fled the country. I was floored. He really sued her. Then why did she come back to find me? Who knows? She's crazy. Maybe she's delusional. Henry answered matter-of-factly. I believed Henry's version of events. But what about the sleep-talking part? I asked. Henry paused for a moment, then said, if I told you I was calling out your name, would you believe me? I laughed. You mean to tell me you knew you'd meet me one day? Henry sighed. Yep, in my dreams. We've been connected for years. Get lost. After that, Henry and I started living together, blissfully unaware of everything else. Legally, of course. In the meantime, the police contacted me. The guy who attacked me was caught when he tried to strike again. Thanks to officers staking out the area, it felt like something worth celebrating. But just as I was about to get excited, my mom called. Chloe, you actually have a boyfriend. I froze. Were you planning to hide it forever if the guy from the blind date didn't tell me? Mom, I can explain. What's there to explain? My mom suddenly started laughing. Bring your boyfriend home already. I didn't have a choice. The next weekend, Henry showed up at my parents' house with gifts, driving his car. My mom's a sucker for good looks. The moment she saw Henry, she couldn't stop smiling. When Henry called her Auntie, she immediately started treating him like her own son. Thank goodness for my dad. He asked me a few concerned questions, then turned to Henry with a skeptical look. So what if you're good looking? Can you turn that into food on the table? Of course. My dad didn't hold out for long either. At dinner, my dad started talking about the stock market, and Henry jumped in, talking confidently about it. By the end of their conversation, my dad was fully impressed with Henry. He wouldn't stop praising him. At least he managed to give me a compliment, though. He said I had good taste. Thanks, Dad, for remembering me. But my parents' affection for Henry was still limited, just like it was for me. After dinner, my dad went off to play mahjong, and my mom went to chat with the neighbors. That left just the two of us at home. Is there any place you want to go? I asked Henry. Henry thought for a moment, then asked, can I see some photos of you? Of course. I pulled out my photo album, which had pictures from when I was little all the way to now. I was such a cute kid. Am I cute? I asked Henry. Henry nodded. Very cute. Makes me want to hide you away, just for myself. The first part of the album was full of my childhood photos, and then there were some from my high school days. There weren't many pictures from high school, though. When I was a senior, I got these airbangs that looked amazing, but I didn't take any pictures back then. It's a shame you can't see them, I said with some regret. I've seen them, Henry replied. I laughed. What? Did you see them in a dream or something? Henry looked at me and sighed. Sis, you're really clueless. Henry, I exclaimed. It wasn't until much later that I realized Henry had been telling the truth. It happened several months later, while I was at Henry's house, going through old photos with his mom. That's when I saw a picture of myself from high school. I froze. Why is there a photo of me? Henry's mom just gave me a knowing smile. Henry and I had attended the same high school. When I was a senior, he was a freshman. The only interaction we ever had was on a rainy day. He was walking in the rain, completely drenched. I happened to pass by, feeling sorry for the handsome young guy getting soaked. I handed him my spare umbrella. Henry says that was love at first sight. I scoffed. That was just you being shallow. If I weren't pretty, would you have remembered me for so long? Henry laughed. Maybe, but liking you isn't just about looks. You're worth it. I was at my most rebellious and lowest point back then, estranged from my family and in an unfamiliar place for school. That little act of kindness from you meant a lot to me, Henry said. But a crush isn't something that happens so easily. Because of that one moment, Henry started paying attention to this girl at school named Chloe. The more he got to know about me, the more he liked me. By the time I graduated, and he started his sophomore year, he realized I was no longer at school. That's when he understood his feelings for me were more than just gratitude. So, when we met again later, wait a minute, I turned to Henry. So, it wasn't that your dad tricked you. Your whole family teamed up to deceive me, didn't they? Henry, looking a bit guilty for once, said, matters of the heart shouldn't be called deception, right? I sneered. This is called marriage fraud. Henry moved closer. Sis, I'm sorry. I'll give you myself, and all my money too. How about that? No, I want a divorce, I said, with an ice-cold expression. Henry suddenly gave me a pitiful look. Sis, could you really bear to? Even though it had been months, my heart, it softened in an instant. Besides, I didn't really want a divorce. I was just venting. Wait a second, Henry. Don't tell me this is all an act too. I started to feel like I'd uncovered something big. Henry smiled. Well, sis, you seem to like hearing it. As long as it's something you like, I'll do it. Looking at Henry's serious face, I suddenly felt conflicted. Yet, somehow, I was enjoying all of this. Seeing that I wasn't bringing up the marriage fraud again, Henry leaned in and asked, I'm willing to do what sis likes. Would sis be willing to do what I like? I looked at him, confused. What do you like? This, Henry said as he leaned in and kissed the corner of my lips. Me, get lost. Henry, hearing this, continued with his pitiful act. Sis doesn't remember me at all. Me, sis, Henry called me again. Sis. Forget it. As Henry's kiss fell again, only one word came to mind. Desire. The story is now complete. Thank you for reading. Subscribe to the channel to get the latest updates. New stories are updated daily.